Well, hey folks, how you doing? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me here today. Well, I want to talk a little more about the Colorado-Nebraska mystery drones because we've had another important kind of update from someone in the federal government, and I want to thank one of our subscribers, Ken K, for pointing this article out to me. This comment comes from none other than Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao in the Trump administration. She was interviewed at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, a few days ago, and she said that the drone sightings are absolutely real and unexplained. Her quote is, "We don't know who they belong to. We don't know who's operating them. To this day, we do not." So basically, you've had a very high level official in the United States government. Keep in mind that the head of the Department of Transportation is a cabinet level position. There's, 15 cabinet secretaries handpicked by the president to serve on the cabinet. And the Department of Transportation, the Secretary of Transportation is actually the 15th highest ranking person in the U.S. government if you look at the line of succession coming down from the president through vice president, through Speaker of the House, and so forth, all the way down. You get to the Secretary of Transportation. So this is a high-level government official coming out and saying that the drones are real. Now, if you remember a few days ago, we talked about that MSN.com article where they interviewed sociologist Robert Bartholomew, and he said that this is basically a type of mass hysteria, and we shouldn't make too much of it. Basically what Stanton Friedman called research by proclamation. You don't spend any time to look at the evidence. And in fact, there was a kind of absence of evidence from that plane that the state of Colorado launched to look for these drones, I believe, 2 nights in a row, and this plane didn't see them. I'm not sure why that would be. I mean, the planes fly higher than these drones are only 400 feet over or less over the ground, so it's possible that there's other heat sources that could have made it hard to find them. Or maybe they just weren't out that night that those planes went up. But, there's that old statement that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And for decades now, we've been hearing that because it's hard to find evidence for UFOs, that they don't exist. It's a kind of a psychological delusion that people have, or it's, the common explanations, it's space dust or ice crystals or re-entering satellites and all that type of typical BS sort of explanation that goes completely against the witness account of what they've seen. And in this case, the same thing sort of happened. We had people, sheriff's departments, they're out all night patrolling their counties, and many other people seeing these drones hovering a couple hundred feet over highways and towns and so forth. And the experts didn't want to believe them and said, well, it's mythological. It's like during times of geopolitical tension, there's increased sightings of Bigfoot and UFOs and all this stuff. And they're basically relegating it to the category of urban legend. But I'd say in this case, the delusion is on the part of the media for doing a very poor job of investigating exactly what the witnesses were seeing. As I mentioned, I went out to Lyman in one of the earlier videos, and I talked to people who had actually seen these drones. But I think the reason that this is important is it shows us that if the federal government with all its resources, if the federal government of the United States with all the resources that it has available to it cannot identify these drones, and we have one of these representatives from the federal government, from the Department of Transportation, saying we can't identify these drones and we may never be able to identify who the operator of the drones is. If you can't do that with something as ordinary as a drone, how would you expect to identify something that often is just a one-off situation, a UFO encounter, a sighting, or even contact where someone is taken aboard these craft? We've had many of these cases over the years. I mean, just think of Travis Walton in Snowflake, Arizona, with those other loggers that were out there. Calvin Parker, Charlie Hickson encounters in Pascagoula, Mississippi in the early 70s, or even Terry Lovelace, who we've interviewed on this show, with his account of being taken aboard a triangular craft at Devil's Den in Arkansas in the 70s. So how would you be able to even explain those if you can't explain drones? So there's really kind of two significant points here. I mean, at one level, we find that even something as ordinary as drones are hard to explain. And what that means is something that's even stranger than that by our ordinary standards would also be very difficult to explain. But if the drones turn out to be real, as Elaine Chao says they are, that would also imply that these UFO sightings, just because we can't explain them or find the evidence or get the real hard proof, that they could be equally real too. So I think this is very significant. And on another level, I think it's very important that the federal government has come out and said, we don't know what these are. I mean, normally the institutions that govern our society don't like to come out and say something like that. They're always coming out, experts and professionals always want to look like they know what they're talking about. It's very hard to say you don't know what's going on. But of course, that's the first step towards discovering something new, you know. And hundreds of years ago, around the 1500s, there was this scientific revolution where people started actually looking at evidence. There were new technologies invented. Christopher Columbus discovered America around that time period. And all of a sudden, the old ways were shaken up. It became okay to say that there was something new in the universe that was not explained by ancient knowledge. And in this case, we finally had the federal government come forward and say, we don't know what these are, and we may never know what these are. And I think that's very important. Rather than coming up with some sort of bogus explanation or kind of dismissing the whole phenomena as planets, stars, and satellites, as the MSN article attempted to do, they've at least come out and said, we don't know what these are. And that opens the door to saying, you know, folks, about UFOs and UAPs, we don't know what they are. They're real, but we don't know what they are. So we're getting very close to that point. I think that's the significance of this whole set of events around the Colorado, Nebraska mystery drones, as they're called, is, you know, the highest authorities in the country have come out and said, we don't know what these are. It's real. We don't know what they are. And that allows them to go the next step to UFOs, UAPs. After all, that's what the Navy has said about the Tic Tac incidents and the Roosevelt incidents off of the East Coast, is that UAPs sometimes come into their military operating area and they don't know what they are. Now we've had another kind of government department come out and say, you know, we don't know what these drones are. So I think it's just one more step to say, you know, we don't, UFOs, UAPs are real and we don't know what they are. And I think that's very significant, because the first step to advancing our knowledge about these phenomena is to admit that the old categories that we've been using don't sufficiently explain what they are. And once you can do that, you now can proceed to a bigger discussion of what they could be. And that will lead you into new directions. And that's where all the fun is. Okay. So, again, always curious about your comments. Feel free to comment below. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care for now, and bye.